get on the bus and find out your weekly slice of the news for the Empire, our history, and the wider world. Welcome back to the bus, the broadcast Uldarash station. Today I'm joined by 8 and Sab, and we're going to be covering the ongoing civil war in Uldarash. We're expecting a special guest of the former Empress and current pursuer of civil wars, Quasar, to be joining us. But first, today's weather update. We're currently experiencing a lot less blood rain than normal, which is always a positive. The sun once again appears to be on fire, and the clouds seem to be in the sky, so a pretty normal day for the citizens of Thrafnir and the wider empire of Uldarash.
Now for the weekly update on Uldarash internal news. News on Uldarash internal conflict and possible civil war has been spreading across Thrafnir. We have brought Katerina of Montroig here at the station to explain her case to the fine people of Uldarash. Could the rumors of civil war be true? Let's find out.
Katerina of Montroig, thank you for being here with us today. I have some questions for you, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
The first being was your claim to the throne of Uldarash.
Mm-hmm. Just generally what it is?
Why do you think you are the Empress, and what claims do you have to it, as opposed to Nikephoros?
Sure, so I guess first I can explain the emperors. So Uldarash, for those who don't know, have 2 emperors, one hereditary position passed down from parent to child, and one elected position, which is elected every time the previous emperor either dies or steps down. Back in May, I was elected emperor with a 2/3 majority of the vote. Overwhelmingly won the election, and so ever since I have been the elected emperor.
All right, thank you. Now, it is my understanding that you've made claims that Nikephoros is not qualified or shouldn't be an empress. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Sure, although it does require me going into the whole background of the general situation, but I can give another sort of background explanation if you'd like.
No, go dive straight deep into it.
Sure, so this will obviously be coming from my perspective. So, just keep that in mind. Around, I believe it was on the 18th of October last month, I woke up to learn that several Aurorans and the Spirit Knights, who were the first set of emperors of Uldarash, had apparently deposed me in an illegal military coup. They, from my perspective, made up complete lies about me that were almost nothing even based in reality at all. Gave flimsy justifications at best, and simply removed me without asking the permission of nearly any states. They then afterwards got permission due to the states being fooled by all these lies they had spread. I then requested, rightfully so, that considering there was no legal way for me to be removed from the emperorship, that they either prove that I was guilty of all of the treasonous and various uncouth activities that they'd accused me of, or they give me back my crown. To which the response was initially, no, haha. But eventually, after producing a 15-page proof document showing that I was innocent on every single count they had accused me of, they agreed to tentatively give me a trial to prove that I was treasonous. Then 2 weeks went by with delay, no update on the trial. I found out that the judge never even wanted to take the case. The prosecution had no intent of actually taking it either. They were just happy to wait the whole thing out. As such, me and my lawyer delivered an ultimatum stating that considering I am still legally the Empress, and you will not prove that I'm guilty of anything that you've accused me of at all, why should I not simply consider myself Empress along with the states that still refuse to see your coup as legitimate? I gave them 24 hours to respond. They never responded. So much like in the same manner they had done to me, I announced, fine, I am then announcing that since I am still the legitimate empress, I am using my authority to, much like they did to me, depose Sevens/Nikephoros from the throne. Several states backed me up, declaring that I was still the legitimate empress and that she was not, and we sort of found ourselves in a stalemate. Effectively, I consider the illegitimacy of Nikephoros to be as legitimate as she considers mine, from a legal standpoint, that is, which has now erupted into a state of civil war on Nikephoros' desires because they will not recognize me as the legitimate empress.
As you know, Uldarash exists to act as a bulwark against the North. If you regaining Empress status back comes at the cost of Uldarash's stability and at the cost of Uldarash to protect itself from the North, do you truly believe that that is a just course of action? How would you reconcile the nature of your call to action, possibly undoing the very foundation of the system you wish to return to, even if your removal of that system was indeed unjust?
I would say that I do not believe Uldarash is at risk from the north, generally speaking, of course. I would say that Uldarash is in a very unique situation in Rathnir, where many of our states are larger than the top 10 nations in all of Rathnir. Aurora, Alfheim, Montroig, I believe all would rank in the top 10 nations population-wise if they were independent. Many of these states, specifically Alfheim and Aurora, to be fair, have large individual standing armies. Even in a total Uldarash breakup situation, which again is not my goal in any way, shape, or form, and I would much rather didn't happen, and will do my best to ensure it doesn't happen, I'm still relatively confident that the nations of Haven could put aside individual differences to stop a foreign nation invading. I think that we generally have been together long enough at this point. Oh yeah, and of course Chevgry as well has grown to be large as well. I think generally speaking, we've been together long enough that even with this sort of civil war happening, that we would be able to put aside our differences in the case of a common enemy. For instance, coming to actually claim land in Haven and colonize us again, as you say, Uldarash was originally founded to combat imperialism in Haven, generally speaking, done by the North and the East. But yeah, I'm fairly confident that even in an incredibly bad, the worst case scenario, let's say where Uldarash, let's say this war drags on and on, there is no clear winner, Uldarash dissolves into all of its separate states. Honestly, I'm still relatively confident in those separate states' abilities to come together to defend Haven as a continent.
Okay, so then you are confident then that your call to action with the ultimatum and all of that is for sure not even going to cause any sort of threat of possible invasion on Haven, and it really isn't something that anyone in the South should worry about.
That's not what I said at all, no. I do not believe that my ultimatum would cause anyone to invade Haven. But, of course, I can't see the future. It's entirely possible that that will happen down the line. There are, of course, reasons to be worried about it and even to be scared. I would just say that I am personally confident enough in the nations of Haven, character-wise, that they would be able to put aside their individual differences in that case.
Okay. So you're willing to risk it.
No, again, that's not what I said at all.
Okay,
I'm fairly confident in my assessment that the states of Haven would be willing to put aside their differences to defend their homes.
Okay.
All right, so it sounds like you and Nikephoros are in a legal standoff. You both are using the same legal argument to justify your claims. How would you say this should be resolved, / how would someone legally be taken out of power, in your eyes?
Oh, legally, there is no way to remove an empress. For context, I recently passed a constitution several days before I was deposed. One of the earlier drafts specifically included a way to remove an empress from power. but I was made to remove that section both by Nikephoros and Aurorans as a general group. I thought that was fair enough at the time. They presented me with decent arguments, only to find out about a week later that they had deposed me anyway. So legally, as I said, there is no way to remove an empress. It's annoying. I did try to account for it, but no one seemed to listen to me at the time. So, until I announced my counter-deposition of Nikephoros, legally I was completely in the right. There is no argument that could be made that I wasn't. I should know. I wrote the Uldarash legal system. Yeah, there just was no way to do it. It was an illegal paramilitary coup. It's plain and simple. But I came to the issue where the courts wouldn't do anything about the case.
I'm pretty sure
They
it was just a
delayed,
regular military coup,
delayed.
not a paramilitary coup.
They delayed. The High Council wouldn't do anything. The Aurorans control such a large amount of seats on the High Council that they also wouldn't let anyone do anything. A lot of states were scared of them in the immediate aftermath. They had just removed the Empress from power because she was doing things they disagreed with. So I was stuck in a standpoint where I was legally completely in the right, but there was nothing I could do. The courts wouldn't hear me, so what am I supposed to do in that situation? So I turned to the only option I had left, give them one last chance to take my case, explaining that I will take actions if they don't. They refuse to take the case again. I do the only thing left to me to attempt to restore my legitimate place, which in my eyes had never been removed, which was the exact same thing they had just done to me. So at the very minimum, they can argue that morally it's the exact same thing they did. In fact, I believe technically I acquired the blessings of more states before I did it than they did. They acquired permission of states retrospectively after the case when they lied about what I'd done. I didn't lie about anything. I simply stated what happened. So therefore, yeah, currently it's a bit of a grey legal area, I'll admit, as shown by the fact it's currently devolved somewhat into civil war.
All right, thank you for your insight. On that note, and actually kind of branching off from it, what do you think, or how do you think this will affect Alderashi citizens? And how do you think your political stance will change their lives compared to Nikephoros?
Well, as for how my political stances will change their lives, I would point to how it already has changed their lives. I've guaranteed the citizens of Uldarash the right to free speech, freedom from slavery, the right to practice any religion they want, to not be punished for practicing the religions they want, to a fair trial. I would simply point to any one of those achievements as something more than any other emperor of Uldarash has ever done for their citizens. That's the simple question on that part. And I have to ask, what was the first part of the question again? Sorry?
It's mostly just your political views.
My political views. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, as is probably commonly known, I'm a democratic reformer. I've instituted several reforms to the empire, the introduction of the Low Council, the largest single democratic body in the history of Rathnir. I also introduced a constitution, which isn't really so much a democratic reform so much as a legal reform, but several people don't seem to understand that empires can have laws. I, in fact, have been told by several, specifically Auroran officials, that they do not believe empires should have laws, which I'm personally left confused by, being from, in real life, a kingdom with laws. Ultimately, my reforms would only ever go so far as the people of Uldarash wanted. I am constrained by the High Council. If the High Council agree with me, then clearly the people of Uldarash generally support the reforms. I think basically I was going to reform it as much as I could and hit the point where I couldn't, and the people of Uldarash had had enough, and then I was going to stop.
So, what do you currently think about other countries trying to get involved in our current Empress kerfuffle?
I understand it. It's very understandable, basically. A lot of foreign nations have shall we say, strong feelings towards the various states inside of Uldarash and Uldarash as a whole. Fairly understandably so, I'd say, considering the history a lot of them have with the nation. I can say that I have personally not signed any deals with any nations as of yet for anything involving the Civil War, despite belief and claims to the contrary. I would rather this be a fully internally Uldarash war, but I do understand that I think for both sides they have allies that they would like to call in. But yeah, it's a very complicated situation, effectively. And I do ultimately have to consider the safety of the states which have graciously called for me, and ultimately I have to consider protecting them before anything else. But once again, I will state that I have, as of now, not signed any official deals with any foreign nations.
All right, thank you. And finally, what's your take on the attempted assassination of Nicephorus's life?
It's bad. I personally, again, had nothing to do with it. As far as I'm aware, no loyalist forces had anything to do with it. We've attempted to investigate on our own end, considering it was inside of our territory. It was two of our people getting married. We believe we know the house it came from. We sent people to check. They couldn't find anyone. It's sad, and we shouldn't resort to those sorts of tactics. I personally would never. I think most people that know me can attest to that fact. Yeah, it's bad. It shouldn't have happened. It was stupid. Whoever did it should be found and taken to justice. And since it happened inside of Montreuil territory, they will be if we catch them, considering attempted murder is illegal.
All right, thank you, Katerina of Montreuil.
Thank you, 8, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Katrina, for attending our interview. That's all we have time for today on this episode of the Broadcast Uldarash Station. Tune in next episode where we'll cover some more history around the world, around the Empire, and also an update to the weather, as I'm sure you're all keen to find out how much more blood rain will there be, and will the sun still be burning? Who knows? Goodbye.